Hey everyone, and welcome along to Seriously Risky Biz. This is our podcast here all about cybersecurity policy and intelligence. My name is Amberleigh Jack, and in just a moment I'll bring in Tom Uren, who is our policy and intelligence editor, to chat all about this week's Seriously Risky Business newsletter. And you can, of course, read that and subscribe to it over at our website, risky.biz. But first, I'd like to thank the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, who support Tom's work here, and also Lawfare, who syndicate his newsletter and publish it on the Lawfare Media website. And finally, this week's episode is sponsored by Sublime Security, so a big thank you to them for that. G'day, Tom. Great to have you.
G'day, Amberleigh. How are you?
Really good, thanks. And I want to jump into your first story of the newsletter this week. Some reporting's come out that sort of details a few successful disruptive cyber operations that the US has conducted against Venezuela, and this was back during Donald Trump's first term. But as successful as these operations may have been, Tom, you're sort of saying that, you know, bringing out the cyber guns, I guess, aren't really going to do much when it comes to Trump's broader goal of ousting Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro.
Yeah. So the background to this is that for whatever reason, apparently President Trump just really dislikes Maduro and wants him gone.
Right.
I think I knew the reason at one point, but I don't know what it is now. But the story is that during his first term, the Trump administration worked as a whole lot of people were kind of, restraining maybe Donald Trump's desires for immediate action. And it appears like in this case, they threw up all these kinds of ideas about what could be done. And people are extremely reluctant to use military force against another country, mostly because it's got a long history of being successful in the short term. You achieve your military objectives, but you never achieve your longer term objectives about reshaping the country, the target country or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they came across, I guess, a campaign of different disruptive cyber activities. So some of those have been reported before last year by Zach Dorfman in Wired, and he spoke about a campaign to disrupt the pay of the military. Now, this reporting has the CIA disrupting Maduro's intelligence service, so knocking their network offline, presumably temporarily, because these things never last. And there's another operation described where Cyber Command disrupts the satellite comms of the Wagner Group, which is a group of Russian mercenaries. And they were deployed to Venezuela reportedly to help support the regime of Nicolás Maduro. And so there are these different campaigns, operations going on. And by all accounts, they were all successful. So if you think about the United States, it's the top, or at least the top 1, 2, or 3 cyber powers. It's got the most capability to do, a vast range of different cyber operations. And then you compare it to Venezuela, which has got to be the smallest fish in the sea.
Or as you pointed out in the newsletter here, the US is an orca and Venezuela is a sardine, I guess.
A cyber sardine, even. So, no surprise, the operations are a success. Trump's goal was to get rid of Maduro. And of course, you can have a computer fall over and it doesn't make any difference for the country's leadership. And so I think this is a really interesting example of the limits of cyber power. You've got the most powerful country versus that's got to be one of the least powerful, and it just can't achieve certain goals.
Yeah.
So the CNN piece, which is the most recent one, talking about the Wagner Group disruption and the intelligence service disruption, it's got this nice quote from a former White House official who says, "The hope was that aggressive covert action could cause enough discomfort and create sufficient disturbances that the military, which has played a critical role in keeping Maduro in power, would be convinced to switch sides." So that, at first glance, seems reasonable enough. You make it painful. I'm having second thoughts about supporting this guy. But the previous piece I referred to, which was in Wired last year, it talked about just the state of the country at the time.
Yeah.
So an official then is talking about the average person has lost 25 pounds. They have no food, they have no electricity, they have no jobs, they have no medicine. And so if a situation is that dire and you're still able to remain in power, it's not likely that switching off a few computers here and there is going to make any difference whatsoever. So it does seem that the pay disruption, where they cut military pay, like it had some effect. People didn't like it. But I think when you're talking about an entire country, it's just, disrupting those things seems like it's going to be like, it's a very tenuous path to get from not getting paid to overthrowing a regime. So I think it's just a great example of the things that cyber is not good for. And I guess in the broader sort of context today, it looks like the lesson that Trump learnt from this is that cyber operations are not that good. If I want direct action, I want direct action. So today we've got the USS Gerald Ford, an aircraft carrier, steaming or whatever aircraft carriers do towards the Caribbean. And we've also got a whole lot of strikes of supposed drug boats. A lot of them are coming out of Venezuela. And so the lesson he seems to have learnt is that if you want real action, you get like the real military to launch bombs and sail ships and boats and all that kind of stuff. But I just thought it was a great example of the limits.
I appreciate that you sort of said, it seems to highlight, I guess, what these cyber operations are not good for, but it seems, at least in part, they were kind of good at satisfying Donald Trump the first time around.
Yeah, that's one of the points the reporters make, is that part of the value of these operations was that they were, I guess, a dog and pony show where you could say, look, President Trump, here are the things we're doing. These are, highly sophisticated, finely tuned, orchestrated operations that will achieve a specific effect. It sort of sidestepped the requirement to do something more muscular or more kinetic, I guess. And so it was a way of avoiding the quagmire. And I think it is a good example of they give you extra options. So if you want to disrupt Maduro's intelligence service, it's a big step to do that with a guided missile or a cruise missile or whatever. That's like a very different thing. Doing it with a cyber operation, like in some sense, it's not as good. It's not as enduring. It's not likely to degrade their capacity for a long time. But it's better in the sense that you can do it. You can do it now. You could probably do it next week. You might be able to do it the week after that. And you're not committing to a military engagement that you, in some sense, lose control of when it starts and when it stops. And I guess the ramifications are just a lot more significant. So I think there is still like tremendous value in them. It's just the right time, the right place for the right purpose.
Yeah. And I want to move on, Tom, to your second piece. And this is sort of something that you've given great analysis on before, is the sort of unconstrained collection of geolocation data being a real national security risk in the US. But there's some new reporting that you've touched on today that kind of highlights that out-of-control adtech issue as a problem for everyone. So tell me a little bit about what that reporting was and what it found.
Okay, so a group of investigative journalists in Europe gathered together basically free samples of data from, information from data brokers, and that contained mostly smartphone geolocation data. They amassed 13 billion records that they got for free. So presumably they went around to a number of data brokers. They don't say how many. it struck me as that's a large amount of records. They say each record was associated with a unique device identifier. So if you've done any work or any thinking about this kind of material, it means that once you've got a unique device identifier, you can track a device over time. And because it's geolocations, you've got it over time and over places. So it's very easy to construct a pattern of life for an individual device.
Wow.
And that means you can tie it to workplaces, homes, places of worship, where they visit, doctors, medical facilities. It's like trivial to do that if it's a unique identifier. And they got this data and then they basically said, in this country, here's an example of the types of people that we were able to essentially identify or dox or whatever. Around the European Parliament, we were able to find senior EU officials, people working for this organisation, people working for that organisation. And because it's a group of journalists, they did that in a number of different countries, the Netherlands, Norway, Switzerland, Ireland. It's all the same story. If you've got data like that, you can find important people and you can basically track them and know where they go.
And being able to collate that kind of to that daily routine so easily, I mean, that's kind of the important and scary stuff. Yeah. The Swiss report, it actually contains a very nice data visualization of one particular individual. And they've got the dots on maps, at this time they went here, ... And this time they're here, ... And that person was actually fairly rigorous with the types of apps that they used. So they weren't use all the apps all the time with all the permissions. So that seemed like a realistic example of what you could do with a particular normal person. And that was quite a striking visualization. So people have done that. The New York Times did that in the US. And it's never been clear to me, the Europeans use Apple and Google, but they've got the GDPR, the General Data Protection Rule, which is viewed as the most stringent data privacy rule. So it was never quite clear to me at the top of the funnel, they're using the same internet advertising technologies. But is the sort of process of that data working its way through to data brokers, is that disrupted by the GDPR? Does that mean that they're safe? So a couple of years ago, the Irish Council for Civil Liberties looked at this thing called RTB, which is like it's an auction. Every time you visit a web page, there's an auction to sell you an ad. Yeah.
And so that's one way that feeds data into the advertising machine. So I knew that at the top of the funnel, there's this stuff that goes on. But this reporting shows that, it actually does flow through to data brokers collating and reselling it in a way that the individual consumer can't control. So we've known that it's a problem in the US, and this reporting just shows that it's going to be a problem everywhere. Nowhere has stricter privacy rules than the EU. So if it's not, that doesn't stop it. Nothing is stopping it. So, Australia, where I live, I'm sure we've got this problem. Canada, the UK, everywhere has this problem. We just haven't known it because there hasn't been good reporting about it.
Yeah.
Even New Zealand.
Even way down here in little old New Zealand.
That's right.
Now, Tom, I want to jump into your final piece of reporting here, which is that we've seen a report recently about how organised crime is collaborating with cybercriminals to steal cargo from logistics company. And this kind of feels like the Goodfellas hackers crossover that we never knew we wanted. But how exactly are they doing? Do we know how exactly they're doing this? And tell me a little bit more about what's going on here.
How exactly? It depends what you mean by exactly, because the exact answer is that they're hacking and then they're stealing.
Yep.
So it's Proofpoint has this report. They're like a cybersecurity company, and so I think it's very good at the first parts, which is they, use various mechanisms to get into trucking and logistics companies, and they're using legitimate tools and they're abusing them to gain access. And then they use that to bid to carry cargo from point A to point B. So apparently there are these marketplaces. It seems like they get I guess you call it intelligence about what the high value loads are, or loads that they would be interested in. And it appears that they bid for them. And then Proofpoint is not a shipping company. So it gets a bit hazy there. But there's testimony from a woman, Donna Lem, on behalf of the American Trucking Association, where she testified to the US Senate. And she talks about what she calls is strategic theft of cargo. And that often involves cyber-enabled parts. And she breaks it down quite nicely in there's these different ways that you can steal cargo. Sometimes it's just turning up with a truck with the right logo and the right uniform and pretending to be the right shipment. And so you could imagine that if you're a cyber criminal, you get the right information. The organised crime group could turn up with the right looking truck at the right time. Or perhaps just ahead of the right time, take the cargo and be gone. But that part's a bit, I guess there's many options. Another way is that you just alter the shipping destination and you send it somewhere else. So the legitimate purchaser, they've got an address, but you just alter it so it ends up somewhere else that the organised crime group can take control of. Now, Lem said that these organised groups can be vast and have their own call centres, operate seemingly legitimate warehouses and online marketplaces. So it seems that once you're operating at that scale, you've got a lot of different options, and that the cyber-enabled part, you would choose whatever works for you, like however you want to do that part. It would facilitate, the next step, whatever you're good at. So I thought this was just fascinating. And it also seemed that when you've got that scale, and that's because cargo theft is a huge business. So apparently in the States, it's like $35 billion. That seems like a number to me. It's a big enough number that you can afford to either pay hackers or employ them. And if they're, adding a percentage or 10% to your business, like that's actually a pretty good deal, I think. It just struck me that both the US Senate testimony, she said, this is becoming a bigger thing. Like as the supply chain becomes more digitized, there's more opportunities to use like basically malware or illegitimate access to sort of boost your thefts. And it's also something that Proofpoint's observed is that they've observed lots and lots of these campaigns. I think it was just a dozen since maybe August or something like this. So quite a lot recently. And they also have another report, which is basically the same thing, just a different mechanism of using cyber to steal stuff. And that was more aimed at high-end electronics, and it used a different way. I think it was coming up with a kind of bill of lading or something like that. But, same idea.
Also, I just suddenly popped into my head as well. You were also mentioning to me this morning that one of the favourite things was energy drinks. Is that?
Yeah, that's right. So the US, apparently it's quite common to have energy drinks that are just illegal in other countries.
Yeah, right.
Because, it's a free country. You can drink whatever you like, even if it's...
Freedom drinks.
Even if it's going to kill you. And so they're high value. You can transport them to somewhere else where they're illegal and you can get a premium.
Wow.
Because of that, I guess, black market nature of the energy drink. It's not just an energy drink. It's a black market illegal energy drink.
Gone are the days of hijacked cigarette trucks. Now black market energy.
That's got to be a thing too, surely.
Yeah. Tom, I kind of love in this newsletter how you refer to yourself as an eternal cybersecurity optimist as well. But you have sort of no hopes of this kind of real world cyber-enabled crime to be stopping anytime soon.
I kind of think of cybersecurity as you're plugging the obvious holes first. And in a way, if you're an optimist, that means you get to the less obvious holes because you're plugging the obvious ones.
Right.
And I think cyber criminals doing this kind of hacking is a non-obvious hole. So in a way, it's an evidence that things are getting better because it's harder to just be a cyber criminal and steal like magic money just by yourself. And so in a way, in a weird way, this is a sign of optimism, but I think it also makes it worse at the same time because now cybercrime is having real world impacts, which seems like bad.
And I guess that's kind of, I mean, that's a sort of theme that we touch on quite a bit, seems to be, you know, no matter how good or how many ways we find to stop whatever's happening, there's always something in the background ready to come up. And it seems like
I think like sort of my meta philosophy about this is that everything was built without security in mind.
Yeah.
And that made us get to a place where like the internet is very, very useful. It's just like very, very insecure. And because it's been built the entire time without those security checks, it takes a long time to, you know, build them into processes now. But if we'd been building security in from the beginning, we probably wouldn't really have the internet. So, you know, it's okay.
All right, Tom. Hey, on that note, we may actually leave it there, but thank you so much for joining me once again. And of course, you can read Tom's full analysis in the Seriously Risky Business newsletter on our website, risky.biz. But Tom, have a great week, and we'll catch you same time next week.
Thanks, Amberleigh.